Well, hello guys. How y'all doing today? I hope that everything is going well and going your way. Um, I've been getting a lot of questions about what's been going on in the marketplace, inflation, home prices, where is everything headed? And so I just wanted to take a moment to quickly go through that and answer those questions if I can. Please note that I wish I was as smart as this is going to appear, but I get a lot of my information from a company called Keeping Current Matters. I prescribe to them, I get their data and everything, and they also help provide content and information for me to share with my clients. So these are my these are the people that I hire to help me stay on top of it because there's a lot of information going out there. As a finance guy, I like to align myself with people who are very good at what they do, and Keeping Current Matters is one of those folks. So as I go through this, please note that I'm stealing from them, okay? But I'm sharing it with you, and I have permission to do this. All right. Well, with that, I wanted to start talking about the monthly market report. And this is from as of August. I know I'm a little bit behind the curve here. Been super busy helping my clients, so hopefully you forgive me there. But what we're going to be talking about is what's happening in the current market, why the market won't crash, and the big one that everyone wants to know: what's ahead for the forecast for the rest of the year? What are the experts saying about the rest of 2022? So I'm going to jump right into the first topic, and that is what's happening in the current housing market. Now, I think we can probably all agree that this year is really defined by rising mortgage rates. And what we're looking at here is the Freddie Mac 30-year fixed rate from January all the way to the latest data we have today. And what we can see over time is that mortgage rates really ticked up week after week after week. And now, and as you know, they started to potentially peak right around the mid June, end of June time. And now we're seeing a lot of volatility. So when I say that they've peaked, definitely not out of the woods yet. Signs of it, yes, but mortgage rates are showing a lot of volatility. Where we are today, a little bit lower than where we were about a month ago, but we're still watching them. A lot of this has to do with the move that the Federal Reserve is making to ease inflation. Inflation is the enemy of long term interest rates, and that's exactly what the Fed is trying to do. They're trying to ease inflation. And as that starts to happen, as we see, or as we saw the last Federal Reserve meeting, they raised the federal funds rate by 75 basis points. Now, when that happens, this does not dictate where mortgage rates go, but it started to signal that maybe the Fed is getting inflation under control. Now we're still watching it. Started to We're still watching it. That's for sure. But as that starts to happen, the fear of recession comes into the conversation. And those who are calling all of these shots and looking at this are starting to see a lot of chatter in the media. We're starting to talk about what happens if we're in a recession. And I think that's a piece we want to follow because I'm going to set up for you today what history shows us about what happens to the housing market during recessionary times. And a lot of times that we've seen in history shows us that mortgage rates typically fall during a recession. Let me say that again. Mortgage rates typically fall during a recession. So this is a big piece that we're going to talk about today. The question is, are we in a recession? Well, the National Bureau of Economic Research, this is the group that defines what a recession is and what it is, says a recession is a significant decline in economic activity spread across the economy lasting more than a few months, normally visible in real GDP, real income, employment, industrial production, and wholesale retail sales. Now, whether or not we're in a recession right now is really kind of up for debate. It's actually become a little bit political in this country, and I'm not going to get into that aspect of it, but I will set up the argument for you. This is the technical definition of a recession, but we also know is the widely held belief that a recession is two consecutive quarters of negative growth. If you look at this chart right here, you can see that going all the way back to the 40s, or the late 40s, every time we've seen two consecutive quarters of negative growth, a recession has been called. The reality is what we want to break down in the housing market is what the data says and why not to fear recession for the housing market. If you talk about what experts are saying, this is a survey from Wall Street Journal that asks economists if they believe recession will happen in the next 12 months. Excuse me, here, hold on. Page up, page up. There we go. Sorry, guys. So here's a survey of the economists. Um, 12% of economists said, just like last year, that they were expecting it to go into a recession. Um, but half of the economists say that we're headed for a recession in the next 12 months, and that's as of July 2022. So while we can talk about what's happening in the world around us, we can really hear all the chatter around us. The question that we want to be able to answer is how would a recession impact? How would the housing market? How would the recession impact the housing market, and how would it be impacted by a recession? So if we look at what the data says, a recession does not mean falling prices. This visual shows us that in the four of the last six recessions, home prices have actually appreciated in value. Now, we all remember in 2008 when home values lost nearly 20% value, but that's really a very fundamentally different place than where we are today. The market was dramatically different. We're going to break down a lot of that today in this report. But truth be told, um, four out of the six past recession, home prices have actually appreciated. So let's go back and see that. So this is the last six recession. Home prices changed during the last six recessions. Okay, see 2008. We're not in the same place as 2008. And as we look at this, the recession means falling mortgage rates. Okay, so recession also means falling mortgage rates. Now, as we look at the data about what's happened with mortgage rates over the past six recessions, those have also declined. That's what you can see here. This is the decline. The percentage points decline in mortgage rates over the last six recessions from the peak to the trough. So you can see every time mortgage rates have ticked down. So that could be a really good news for the housing market. Those buyers who have been maybe hit the push or pause button in the process or step out of the home buying process because they've been priced out of the high mortgage rates. Mortgage rates declining could be a very good thing. And if we look at the graphically, what we can also see, this is a combination of data from Freddie Mac and Mortgage Specialist. It shows how from the peak of the recession, let me go back to that. Here we go. Um, um, each of those, so sorry guys, let me back up here. Um, It shows how from the peak of the recession to the trough, each of those yellow boxes that you can see across this graph, how mortgage rates have fallen in recessionary times. Now, this doesn't indicate exactly what will happen every single time, but we can learn quite a bit from what history shows us. And I think this quote from Fortune really helps us as well. It says over the past five recessions, mortgage rates have fallen an average of 1.8 percentage points from the peak seen during the recession to the trough. So to top, and in many cases, they continue to fall after the fact. It takes some time to turn things around, even when the recession is technically over. So, what does this mean? It means we look back at what we've seen historically, mortgage rates have fallen in times of recession. The question we want to be able to answer is what does this mean for the housing market? Those visuals on recessions doesn't mean falling prices. Recessions mean falling mortgage rates, not falling home prices, but falling mortgage rates. This is what traditionally happens in times of recession in the housing market. That might be a great time for buyers to jump back in, and it may be one of the reasons why housing actually helps us into the soft landing that we keep hearing about. So, with that in mind, let's talk about another big question that's on everyone's mind, and it's about a housing crash. What I'm going to break down for you is why the housing market won't crash, and I think that the heart of this is in inventory. Now we know that there are three places where inventory comes from. It comes from existing homeowners, current homeowners listing their homes, putting them up for sale. It comes from new construction, so newly built homes coming onto the market, and it comes from potentially distressed properties, so short sales and foreclosures. So what I'm going to share with you today is where the inventory is coming from today, and when we look at the inventory perspective, why that means the housing market won't crash. If you think back to the um, last time when the housing market crashed in 2008, we had an oversupply of homes in the market, and today we have an undersupply. Anytime there's an oversupply of homes, it causes home prices to fall. What I'm going to share with you today is why that certainly isn't the case. Like I said, it starts with the fact that we just don't have enough homes for sale on the market. This is a look at existing inventory, and today the total housing inventory registered at the end of June, the latest data that we have, was 1.26 million units. Now, if we look at that from a month supply, that's what you're seeing right here. Unsold inventory today is at a 3-month supply. That's a little green bar that you can see over on the right. Now compare that to the red bars. That's the oversupply that we had during the housing bubble when the market crashed. That's because we had more homes on the market than we had buyers to buy them. We have that exact opposite today. And if you look at this comparatively, where we are today is nowhere near the oversupply we had last time. Now, you would have to build a case that a flood of homeowners are getting ready to sell their houses. They're going to jump into the market, they're going to make a move, and all of this inventory is going to come off the market that would actually tip the scales into the oversupply zone. We're just not even close to being there. The typical neutral market is 6 to 7 months of supply of inventory. We don't even have half that at this point. So although we know this number is growing, and we're keeping an eye on that because more inventory is coming to the market, that's the tick up we're seeing this year. We certainly aren't anywhere near where we could potentially see the market crash because of so many homes coming on the market. Now, the other place where inventory comes from is new construction. This is a look at the monthly new um, permits and housing starts. Those are the leading indicators that tell us where the market is headed. And then on the bottom, under construction and housing units completed, those are the lagging indicators of what's happened so far. And what we can see in terms of leading indicators, the two at the top, permits and starts, those are slowing down from May to June. You can see that happening, and that's because builders are saying, hold on, we're seeing mortgage rates rise. We're seeing that softening buyer demand. We're not going to overbuild. We're not going to get started on more homes than we know we can complete. They're really being cautious right now. And so while we've had 14 years of undersupply of newly constructed homes built in this country, they're not going to overbuild at that time. That's the little tick down that you see, so slowing there. And if at the bottom, especially down the housing units completed, you can see that we're headed to build a seasonally adjusted annual rate of about 1.3 million homes this year. Now that's wonderful. That will add more inventory to the market. It'll help really create some options for home buyers. But we're not on pace to have an oversupply. You can see that May to June tick down on units completed. So we're definitely seeing more new construction. We're on pace to build 1.3 million homes in this country. We haven't seen that in over 14 years. That's huge. That's a wonderful addition to the inventory, but not anything that would take us into an oversupply like we had in the housing market crash of 2008. Now, that the third place where inventory comes from, we talked about this quite a bit over the past couple of years, is foreclosures or short sales or distressed properties. The reason we're not going to be seeing a flood of foreclosures, a big part of that is because lending standards are under control. Now, back when the housing bubble burst, we had much looser lending standards. They've highlighted up, they've tightened up significantly, and that's what this graph shows. This is the Mortgage Credit Availability Index, and it shows the higher that green line is, the easier it was to get a loan. What you can see in 2006 and 7, it really peaked to where we used to joke that it was harder not to get a loan than to get a loan. It was much easier for someone to secure a home loan, and that created inflated demand, and many millions of people were foreclosed on their homes because they weren't coming to the table as a qualified buyer, and they weren't able to repay their loan over time. Now you can see that a green line really drops off. Oh, sorry. There we go. Now you can really see that the green line really drops off 2008, 2009. That's when lending standards really tighten, and that's when we're required to have a more qualified buyer. So those who are securing home loans today, you can see that the green line really hovering along the bottom are much more qualified buyers, more likely to pay their loans and not get into foreclosure. So that's a huge difference that we have today. And if you want to see results of what this has done to foreclosure filings, look at this right here. The U.S. properties with foreclosure filings, and it shows foreclosure activity by year. You can see those red bars are when we had a over a million foreclosures per year, a million foreclosures filing per year in the housing market. In the lending standard tightening that I showed you, did this, made it drop right down consistently, starting especially in about 2011. Fewer and fewer foreclosures every year in this country. Now you can take 2020 and 2021 out for a second because we know we had a moratorium on foreclosures in that time period. But overall, tightening lending standards really changed the game with a more qualified buyer. Now, I want to talk about where we are this year with foreclosure activity, because I think this is starting to come into the conversation as well. And what I want to show you is the first half foreclosure activity by year. Now, this is for January through June of every year going back to 2008. So the first half of the year, that's the latest data we have right now. So it's the best comparison for you to see where we are today in 2022, knowing that there are more foreclosures coming back to the market. Now, it's not a flood of foreclosures because what you can see in 2022 over on the right has just under 165,000 foreclosure filings this year so far. We can compare that back to 2020, pretty much on par with 2020, not even as much as we had in 2018 or 2019. So moving back in the direction of pre-pandemic year, but not a flood like we had seen those red bars where millions of homes were coming to the market as foreclosures. I think we could really look at this and say that lending standards have changed the game. We now know that there are more foreclosures coming to the market this year, but it's nowhere near anything that could cause the market to crash with a wave of foreclosures. So our hearts go out to anyone who's in this situation. We never want to see anyone go through this process, but we're certainly not looking at a crisis or a crash that would cause prices to decline significantly because of inventory coming from distressed properties. I think a big reason for that, and we've covered this quite a bit over the past couple of years as well, is the forbearance program. Here's the latest update that we have. This is how a monthly report, and it's the loans upon existing the forbearance program. So this is current as of very end of June, and what it shows is 36% of mortgages coming out of forbearance were actually paid off, brought current, all sets, all set. People staying in their homes, no issues whatsoever, just walking away from forbearance, staying in their homes. That's huge. But what's even more important is if you look at this blue section, 45% were workouts or repayment plans. So people who are able to do modifications, loan deferrals, they went back to their banks, they changed their situation, and that's huge. This is the opportunity that homeowners didn't have in 2008 that they have today, is to work out a plan so they don't have to lose their homes. Banks were up and down that they didn't want to have happen ever again, and the forbearance program changed the game. So what this really shows is if you put the green and the blue together, that 4 out of every 5 homeowners coming out of forbearance are just fine. They're staying in their homes. They worked out a plan. They paid off their loans. Now there is that orange section of those who are still in trouble. 17% have no loss mitigation plan coming out of the forbearance, and so that's created some concerns. But truly, those homeowners with today's growing equity and appreciating home values have enough equity to be able to sell their homes, make a move, and avoid the foreclosure process. So people today have different options that they didn't have before, and that is huge. That is changing the landscape and one of the biggest reasons why we won't see a wave of foreclosures come into the market. Right now, we have about 400,000 homes that are actually in forbearance, and of course, we don't want any of those to go to foreclosure. But if they did, even all of those homes, or even if those homeowners all sold those homes, we have we have such an undersupply of homes on the market today that they'd be scooped up instantly, and it wouldn't cause a crash for the market. So I think at this quote, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I did not hit." So you're on this graph. Here, let's just highlight this. So, I'm so sorry. This is the green section right here that we're looking at that made up 36.4%. They were able to make the payments, make a plan, get out of forbearance. They're just fine. This blue section is where they worked out the repayment plans, and they are also okay. So if you take this whole thing here, all these folks that are in forbearance are being provided for and taken care of. It's this orange section that are still in trouble, and we're still looking at that. But out of this, only 1.2% short sales are part of that. But thing to note that if all of these go and hit the market, the 400,000 that we're talking about, um, you're not going to have to. It won't be enough to cause the market to uh, have an oversupply of inventory because we're still that low. Sorry, guys, I thought I had that up. Um, so let's take a look at this quote from Rick from ATTOM data. This is the group that follows all of this is really powerful. It says foreclosure activity across the United States continued its slow, steady climb back to pre-pandemic levels in the first half of 2022. Is exactly what we just showed you. While overall foreclosure activity is still running significantly below historic averages, the dramatic increase in foreclosure starts suggests that we may be back to normal levels by sometime in early 2023. So while we're seeing more foreclosures this year, that's because we didn't have any in 2020. We didn't have any in 2021. Roughly, we're seeing some of those come into the market, but certainly not like we did when the housing market crashed. So I think if if you look at it from this perspective, the three places where inventory comes from today, if you look at the month's inventory of homes for sale, even if we have homes coming from all three of those places, we're still in a seller's market. That's the green line down on the bottom. You can see where says today right in the center that the inventory line is rising. It's climbing, and that is great news for the housing market. But nowhere near those 2008 to 2010 regions where we truly had an oversupply of homes on the market that caused the housing market to crash. So as we think about what that the three places where inventory comes from, existing homes, new homes, and distressed properties, nothing that would cause the market to crash. Really important data to get out and to understand so that we can make a powerful and confident decision about why this market won't crash. It's a big question on everyone's mind, and this data and historical context really helps you frame up this conversation with anyone that you might be talking to in regards to this current economic situation that we find ourselves in. There's a lot of news going on, and not all the time does it really truly captivate um, history with the different conversations that we're having. Okay, so hopefully this has been helping square everyone together and help when you're having a conversation with family, friends. Um, Now we've talked a lot about where the housing market is today and why it won't crash, but I think one of the biggest questions on everyone's mind is what's ahead for the rest of 2022. So let's dive into the expert forecast. What are experts saying is ahead for the rest of the year? Well, we started this conversation today talking a lot about how mortgage rates have been rising since the beginning of the year. And I think one of the big things everyone wants to know is where are mortgage rates projected to go. This chart is a look at the mortgage rate projections that that were just released in July from Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, MBA, and NAR. Now, if we look at these across the board, we can average them all out over each quarter. And that right column shows the average of all four. So, what is it telling us? It's really saying that mortgage rates are projected to kind of hang in this steady space right about where we are right now. So mortgage rates being a little more stabilized next year, so that's great news for buyers who might have been priced out of the market, or have pressed pause on their plans because mortgage rates have been rising so steadily. But there's the thing, we're also going to be looking at all the economic factors around us. We've said a lot of that inflation is the enemy of long-term interest rates. So what do we need to do? We need to keep watching where inflation goes. Mortgage rates tend to respond to this case. And as the Feds make moves to raise the federal funds rate to ease inflation, we know that does not dictate where mortgage rates go, but it certainly is part of the conversation. And as we talk about, are we headed for a recession? What typically happens to the mortgage rates in those times? All of these factors play into where the mortgage rates will go over the next year. So according to the experts right now, they're saying holding fairly steady in this low 5-year range. And that means there could be a potential silver lining for buyers. And so I want to share this next quote with you because if that's true, mortgage rates do hold steady. I love this quote for CNBC. They're quoting Joel Kahn from the Mortgage Bankers Association. It says, there could be a potential silver lining for the market. He added, a stabilizing mortgage rates and rising inventory may bring some buyers back to the market during the second half of the year. So great news for buyers. We certainly do hope it's true that mortgage rates hold steady. We're going to keep our eyes on them, and we're going to continue to keep you informed. Another question on everyone's mind, what is projected to happen with home prices? And then we just surveyed almost 400 agents and asked that what's the biggest question that your clients are asking right now? It's about a crash and it's about pricing. That's what they want. They want to know where prices are headed. And I can attest to you that that is the biggest question that I'm getting from all my previous clients, well, current clients, those who I've helped buy and sell, those who might be looking to buy and or sell in the near future. They're all wanting and asking that question. Well, if you look at what experts are saying, this is the home price forecast for 2022. We follow 7 key industry leaders on home pricing. These get updated some monthly, some quarterly, and if you look at the average, all of them together, the average of all 7 is showing 10.3% home price appreciation through the end of this year. So as we look at this year, we are certainly seeing a slowing, a decelerating price appreciation. Last year, we saw an average of 15% according to CoreLogic. Homes appreciated by 15%. We're not necessarily looking at that much appreciation, but nationwide, in most markets, experts are saying an average of 10.3% appreciation going forward. Now, I say nationwide and in most markets because I think this quote is really telling. It's from Mark Zandi, and it's at Moody's Analytics. It says, I don't think the national housing prices will decline in a meaningful way, but there will be some price declines across the country. So you may be feeling this already in some markets, but there are pockets of the country that are overheated, that have appreciated significantly, that will likely see declines that may already be happening where you are. So in the Houston marketplace, I haven't been seeing a lot of price depreciation. What I'm seeing is sellers being humbled, and they try to put the home on the market at a super high rate, and buyers, because of the economics that were talked about with interest rates and inflation and other things, have been coming in and adjusting their price points. And so some of the sellers out there who really need to sell, they've been dropping their price to meet those buyers' pocketbooks. But it's not happening widespread enough to be able to cause appreciation values to shift. if that makes any sense. Also, because it's also lower inventory out there. So, pricing your home in the Houston marketplace is very, very important, pricing it correctly. But overall, because of undersupply compared to demand, experts are saying continued appreciation through the end of this. The other question is, other people's mind is, what does this mean for home sales? We've seen a little bit of a slowing in the pace of home sales. We've seen a softening in buyer demand due to those rising mortgage rates. So, what does this mean for sales? Well, if we look at the NAR, it tells us that this projection for existing home sales, this is a seasonally adjusted annual rate in millions. So, what this means, if you look at the green bar over on the right, NAR is saying that the current pace of sales today, if continued on this pace, we're projected to sell about 5.1 million homes in this country this year. Now look at that compared to 2020 and 2021. It's a drop off, right? Those were exceptional years. They were out of the ordinary. Existing home sales through the roof due to all the record low mortgage rates, the changing needs of the pandemic, all the things that it probably feels like right now is this, and it kind of it's basically Alice in Wonderland. It's basically what all this is. Everything was going at 80 miles an hour. You were cruising, you came around a corner and you saw the flashing lights and you slammed on the brakes and suddenly you're going um, 60, 65 miles per hour and it feels like we're crawling. This analogy is really fitting for this. And examples that things were busy, 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 going, 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 selling, 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 buying, 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 and then it's still that way, but it's slowed and it's shifted. We're still going fast. We're still going highway speeds, but a little bit slower. And so it feels like you're used to going 80 miles per hour, but now you're going 60. So it feels like you're crawling, but you're really not. Um, so so that may be what you're feeling right now when it comes to home sales. However, you're still going the speed limit because if you look at the green bar compared to the pre-pandemic years, 2018, 2019, much more in line with pre-pandemic years, and let's not forget those were great years in real estate. So homes sales softened a bit, but still projected to sell about 5.1 million homes in this country. And if we look at that from a total home sale forecast, this is from Freddie, Fannie, and MBA, we can see that the blue bars were what the experts forecasted in January. That was before mortgage rates took their climb. And then the reforecast in the green bars is the latest from July of 2022. So the latest data that we have right now, a little bit of a softening in total home sales. We sold about 7 million homes last year. We're looking more like anywhere between 5.8 to 6.4 million homes for this year at the current pace. Now, again, we're still very strong in real estate. And what I want you to think about too is that this is pretty typical for the experts to reforecast coming in high at the beginning of the year. We see how the year has kind of shaken out and they reforecasted 2020 was a great example. Forecasts are down, and then when we exceeded expectations and sold a record number of homes that year. So the reforecasting is very typical in this industry. So mortgage rates projected to hold fairly steady. Home sales softening just a little bit, and prices projected to continue rising at a fairly steady rate. Home sales so rising at a little bit more of a moderate rate in most markets. Let me just repeat that. I'm sorry. Home sales are softening just a little bit, and prices projected to continue rising at a little bit more of a moderate rate in most markets. So, what does this mean? Here is a visual um, for the three reasons to buy a home today. If you think about the forecast where home prices are, buying before prices rise higher, and mortgage rates holding kind of steady. So inventory is starting to tick up and come back to the market. There are three things that are happening right now that are creating a great scenario for buyers. We're seeing fewer multiple offer scenarios. So you can see in April, the average of homes sold had 5.5 offers. If you look over on the left, it ticked down to 4.2 in May, 3.4 in June. That is a trend that we are seeing going forward. fewer homes selling above asking price. You can see that percentage has ticked down from 61% to 51%. But don't get me wrong, it's still a very competitive market. If 51% or half of the homes are selling over asking, this is definitely still a competitive market. But a better time for buyers to jump in for the area to, if they're ready to find a home and supply of homes for sale is growing. You can see that inventory, that month supply ticking up as the pace of homes sales and more homes coming back to the market. So certainly not easy to find a home, but right now there's no doubt it's still very competitive. But definitely not as competitive as it may have felt for those who probably stepped out of the process last year or the beginning of this year. Just so that you know, I do have these buyer and seller guides, September 2nd, 2022, um, which is tomorrow or today. They're being released. So they're very much available for you. And so one of the things I wanted to discuss really quick um, when it comes to just the Houston marketplace, because this was all national. In Houston, there are still pockets of areas that are selling above price, and they may actually have multiple offers. However, there's other areas of the Houston marketplace that the opposite is true. And also, I want you to think about in terms example, and this is just an example that I noticed in one area that 3 bedroom homes were actually selling faster than 4 bedroom homes, and you can get a better deal on a 4 bedroom home. Now, this major difference was there's a 4 bedroom, 2 bath, right? A lot of people are looking for 4 bedroom, 2.5, or 3 baths, right? So it's not just about location, it's also about the type of home. And if you're a little bit flexible in what you're looking for in your home, then we can take advantage of the stress that sellers are facing right now when they may have overpriced their home to begin with. And so, for example, I've been seeing a few of my clients obtaining extremely good deals, like almost back to 2020 deals, where home prices were back in 2020. Okay, so they're out there. And if you do not have an agent, if you need someone to come alongside you and help you through that process, I am here for you, either selling or buying. We get down to the numbers. We know what's out there. We use the data to tell us price points. Obviously, it's up to you what you offer or what you want to sell your home for, but at least you'll know all the numbers associated with it. I hope this was helpful. Um, I'll get better at this as I go on. I just wanted to kind of go through and share. I know I was reading my notes, and so there might have been a couple places I messed up there, and I do apologize. I will get better. If you like it, please let me know. God bless you. Bye bye.